Chuck White, a broadcasting legend.
Today we're visiting the Annunciation, the Greek Orthodox Church in Columbus.
His voice, warmth, and larger-than-life personality became part of daily life in Columbus for decades.
Last year at the food parade, we raised over 62,000 items of food. We just want to hit 62,000 items or more this year to date.
Not only a familiar face on television, Chuck was also the wise and gentle voice of Mr. Tree.
Well, how are you?
10 TV is proud to present The Life of Chuck White, a legacy that continues to inspire.
It's a great honor to have been a part of the history, not only of WBNS TV, but of the history of this community. It's been my great pride to have served in the community and to have given back.
Such a gentle giant in the television industry and a man with a legacy that will live on for generations. Hi there and welcome to a special presentation on 10 TV Plus. I'm Jeff Hogan.
And I'm Angela Ann. Like many of you, we remember Chuck White as a humble, kind, and humorous storyteller who really had that incredible knack, oh my gosh, of finding the essence to every story. Sadly, Chuck's story ended on October 4th, 2025 at the age of 90. Beyond what we all saw on television, Chuck was the ultimate family man, a devoted husband to his wife of 60 years, Bernice. His 3 sons say he was simply dad to them, yet they knew their father was also an incredible influence to countless generations, something his family is so proud of today, telling us his memory will remain a lasting source of joy and inspiration.
For more than 5 decades at WBNS, Chuck White excelled in every corner of television as an award-winning news anchor, producer, director of community affairs, and beloved entertainer. And he broke barriers so others could follow.
Nobody owes you anything. You've got to work for what you get.
And work he did in his parents' grocery store in Houston. Texas in the 1940s was tough on a black kid. Segregated schools, whites-only restaurants, and seats in the back. When the kid was 16 on the bus, he had had enough.
I see the sign says "Color" in the back, and I sat in front of the sign. And so the bus driver stops the bus and comes back and says, "Son, why are you trying to make trouble?" I said, "What's the trouble?" And he says, "You're sitting in the white section." So I got up and I moved the sign and flicked it forward. I says, "Now I'm legal, right?"
Defiance with a smile, something he learned from his mom. It's the way Chuck White lived his life.
I was never willing to accept that I was a second-class citizen.
Not in Texas, not in Ohio. In the 1950s, he was a senior at OSU and making a name for himself as a folk singer. His college roommate worked at the local TV station, WBNS. Chuck was a journalism minor and said, "What the heck, I'll apply for a job." And he'll never forget that interview back in 1957.
His mouth flew open, his eyes bulged. He was absolutely shocked, aghast at this black man, young black man, standing before him.
And the response from the young black man?
Am I too tall?
Humor and sharp wit served him well. Turns out Chuck got the job as a copywriter in the WBNS newsroom. He'll never forget his first day, overhearing one of the guys say,
"He'll be out of here in a month."
Try 50 years from that day in 1957 through the next 5 decades. Chuck White made history. He was the first black broadcaster in Ohio. His first gig was a folk music show called Gather Round.
Last night I had the strangest dream.
There were no black faces on the air, so I really didn't have any idea that I was going to wind up on the air, although I thought, you know, if I did that, I could do it. I could do it and do it well.
Do it well he did, over and over. He did the morning news, then co-anchor of the 7 p.m. news, and anchored Chuck White Reports. He may have been best known for hosting Lucy's Toy Shop, the longest-running children's show. And through it all, he sang. During the Civil Rights Movement, he sang to hundreds at the Oval at Ohio State. And 40 years later, during President Obama's inauguration speech,
I could not hold back the tears because I've been there. I knew when he talked about his father, there were restaurants in which his father would not even be served. Well, I was one of those people who would not be served.
And through the years would not be denied. Defiant, dedicated, determined, call him what you want.
You don't think about it. You just do what you think is right.
Everything Chuck did seemed to be the right thing. It is truly remarkable to see how he transitioned his role into the first community affairs director for WBNS. And as he looked to his next successor upon retirement, Chuck didn't have to look very far for that answer. You know that.
Yes, and he didn't have to look far, Jeff. In fact, 10 TV's Angela Pace was Chuck's choice to continue leading that legacy of stewardship that really helped build WBNS to what it is today. She sat down with 10 TV's Tracy Townsend when we first learned of Chuck's passing, and here's what they both had to say.
So glad that you could come in this morning to talk with us.
Thanks for having me.
So you were Community Affairs Director after Chuck retired.
Yep.
Can you talk about just the awesome task of following in his footsteps?
Awesome does not even begin to describe it, Tracy. I mean, Chuck had huge, huge shoes to fill. He was a legend, and everybody knew him, and he knew everybody. And you saw the programs that he worked with, the programs that he created, the programs that he grew, the food parade, the Children's Hospital Telethon, the fan drive for Life Care Alliance. These were all programs that had Chuck White's name attached to them, the 10 TV name attached to them. And it was filling his shoes, definitely a daunting task for me. I didn't know what I was doing. But fortunately for me, Chuck took me under his wing, and I still had time to learn before he officially retired. And every day was like Chuck White Community Affairs boot camp for me.
Okay. And a lot of nonprofits benefited from having his endless support. Can you talk a little bit about what he shared with you about what was driving him to do that kind of work?
You know, the thing is, I always just said to myself, Chuck feels it and he gets it.
Yeah.
Chuck knew exactly what the needs of Central Ohio were, and he also knew that he had the station and the family power to be able to make that work. So he knew that there were hungry people in Central Ohio. So he worked with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank to do the food parade, which we did every year out in front of the station, which was great. People bringing their non-perishable items. It was a party out there. He knew that there were elderly and shut-in people who didn't have air conditioning or couldn't afford to run their air conditioning if they did have it. So we did the fan drive. And then, of course, there was the Jefferson Awards to honor all those unsung heroes out in the community who were helping their friends and neighbors. And the telethon, I could go on and on and on and on and on. But Chuck understood that there were needs out there, and that 10 TV had the power and the people and the resources to help meet those needs. He knew the needs on a one-to-one level because he talked to those folks, and he also knew it on a larger scale too, and he was going to do something about it.
Well, one thing I also think we should talk about is just the defining career that he had as the first Black journalist on TV in the state of Ohio. I mean, that's a defining moment.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge. And to be a Black child growing up here in Columbus, as I did, and to see a Black face on TV. Channel 4 had Ann Walker, another one of my mentors, and then 10 TV had Chuck White. It was a very small group back then. So I just remember being a little girl and saying, to my mother, look, there's a Black man on television. And that, to me, was significant because it meant that there was somebody who, as I like to think of it, had our back. There was somebody out there who understood this community more than a lot of other folks would. And there was somebody out there who gave us a voice and made us more visible. And that was Chuck White.
And so for those in my generation, we had you, Chuck, but we thought this is something we can do.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It gave us hope that there was something that we could do that we had never thought about doing before because we didn't have that image in front of us.
Can you share with us just a little bit about your friendship with Chuck?
How much time do we have? How long
They'll
is
rap
this show?
me.
They'll rap you?
I might listen to them.
Who haven't been rapped in a long time.
I know, that's all like, uh-oh, careful.
Well, first you have to understand that my relationship with Chuck White went way, way back before I even came to work at 10 TV. It was completely one-sided. As a little girl, my sisters and I would sit in front of the television set and watch Lucy's Toy Shop. And there was Chuck White. There was this man who had a guitar and sang, and sometimes he'd have one of his sons on with him. He was the voice of just about every puppet, I think, that was on Lucy's Toy Shop, and he was Mr. Tree. And the highlight of watching Lucy's Toy Shop for me and my sisters was watching Mr. Tree, because Mr. Tree was always asleep, and you had to sing to him to wake him up. And that's what we would have to do. So that's when of course, I didn't know Chuck White was Mr. Tree. I didn't know I didn't know he was in that tree. But then later on, we got to know each other as I got into the business. And then when I came here to work at 10 TV, he would have me MC different events that the station was involved in. And we did the telethon and the food parade and all that. But when I was tapped to succeed him, that's when I got to be not just friends with Chuck White, but buddies with Chuck White. We spent a lot of time together while he was schooling me, and he took me to school every day. And then we would sometimes move the classroom outside 770 Twin Rivers Drive and go to dinner at Lindy's or go to the Rusty Bucket with some of the sales staff, and that's where he would tell me the real deal, what was really going on. That's where I got the skinny on everything. But Chuck got to be one of those people, even after he left, we would spend time together. We would meet for dinner every once in a while with Jackie Popa Armstrong, another one of our co-workers here. He loved music, and he was quite a musician. He was a folk singer, believe it or not. Puffy sleeves and the whole bit.
Oh, I love it.
And we would talk about music, and we would talk about just growing up Black in this country and everything all the changes we had seen. But for the most part, he was one of the most caring, funny, wicked sense of humor. One of the most caring, funniest people, kindest people, most genuine people I had ever been blessed to know.
That is really incredible. So Chuck White, without a doubt, family man, his son Michael, told us that everyone, he was Chuck White on TV, but to them he was just dad.
He was just dad. Boy, did he love his family. I got so tired of listening about Craig and Brian and Michael and Craig and Brian. Oh my goodness, man, just give it I know them, I know their names, I know their whole life stories. But no, that's just how proud he was of his boys. Loved his boys, loved his wife, Bernice, who we laughingly called Bernice, and they were great, great partners. His granddaughters, you would think that he was the only grandfather on the planet. He was an incredible grandfather, loved those girls, and I think that was the thing about Chuck that I loved the most. I don't want to say that he was a father figure, because he would say he wasn't old enough to be my father. I love that. He would tell me that to my face. But to see him with his boys and to hear him talk about his boys and how proud he was, and I knew where they were just about every second of every day, because Chuck would tell me.
Well,
they were blessed to have him as their dad.
Boy, Chuck worked with so many legendary 10 TV anchors. Here's my conversation now with Andrea Cambern and Dave Kaylor as they shared what Chuck meant to them and this community. So let's talk about your memories of Chuck. I mean, where do you begin, right? So Andrea, Dave, when you first came here, Chuck White, already a legend in the community at 10 TV.
Definitely. I'll defer to Dave because he worked with him for 150 years. So Dave?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, when I knew Chuck, or knew about Chuck before I ever got to WBNS 10 TV, because I knew he was Mr. Tree on what at that time Channel 10 was the greatest in producing local television, and it was where that came along with films and guest people that were working together. So I knew Chuck, and Chuck did a lot. I think one thing I do remember about Chuck, and I want to make it clear because this is really true. Chuck White couldn't make anybody mad unless maybe he did after he closed the door, and maybe he spouted off or something. And I never saw Chuck not smile. 2, 3. I saw him get excited sometimes when those of us on the Nationwide Children's Hospital Telethon weren't around and we're supposed to be on the air within 30 seconds. Then he got a little anxiety about that. I got that. That's it. But basically, Chuck White was, he was such an individual that liked everything that he did, and he also really understood the audience, particularly in those childhood programs we had at Channel 10 back then. And once he understood the audience, and he had the role of Mr. Tree, for an example, he became so popular that it was absolutely amazing. And last Christmas, I was with some relatives or something, and I said something about Chuck White, and two of them at the meeting or wherever I was, I don't remember, started singing the theme song, Mr. Tree. I'm Mr. Tree, all that. That's what I remember about Chuck, and that's what I worked with him, is so community oriented. With the telethons and with everything that we did, and with that smile on his face all the time, always had a laugh line somewhere along the line. You meet him in the hallway. That's Chuck White. It truly is. It was really an amazing person. And it was fun to be around. And
Yes.
particularly at the telethon time, when we first went on telethon, we were on all the time. We were 24/7. And so we were on for a long time, and lots of stories that some we can tell and some we can't. But
Oh.
yeah.
Andrea, you had 20 years here at WBNS. Talk about what you remember with Chuck.
He was just a great inspiration in every way, shape, and form. And I think what I remember most about him is something that you don't even see. It's his heart and his compassion and his commitment to our community. And it really helped instill that spirit in me too, and how important Central Ohio is, and how giving and loving and caring the community is, and that we can never forget that, and we just have to give back in any way we can. So he was a great inspiration. And like Dave said, he was always smiling, and he always was there for a hug or whatever you needed. He was an original, and there'll never be another one like him, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And I think what we all got to witness was that connection that he was able to make that transcended the television and radio, right? Back in the day, and then television, and then through the telethon. I mean, he had this magic touch to connect with people. How do you think he cultivated that?
I don't think he cultivated it. I think it came naturally to him. He was just being himself. And that's why it resonated with people. There was no phony baloney. He wasn't acting. He wasn't different on camera than he was off camera. That was who this man was. And he loved our community so much, and all the nonprofits that he supported in so many different ways. So I think it just came natural, and people can relate to that.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Andrea. It did come natural. What you saw is what you got. And in our business, that really relates to success.
Yep.
And Chuck, certainly, that's what he saw. What you saw on the air, same thing you saw off the air.
I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but I do remember some words of wisdom that he told me. So I'm going to ask you if you remember any words of wisdom he gave you over the years. But I just remember every time he was in the newsroom or at the telethon, his first question was always, how you doing? You doing good? And then, of course, I was a young pup, so I'd say, oh my gosh, and he'd say, it's going to be okay. And I was like, okay. It is going to be okay, because Chuck White said it's going to be okay.
Exactly.
Do you guys remember anything?
I think it's along those same lines. He was always just a stabilizing force, because things could get very hectic in everything we did every single day. But when Chuck White walked into a room, it was just a calming effect. He had so much experience, and his legacy and his provenance and just his way just made you feel better and comfortable. So I'm right there with you, Angela. Definitely. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's nothing that you can. I was looking up some sayings. I keep a little book on sayings that I run into, and I think this this probably summed up Chuck better than anyone, or than anything we could say. But this is the way he lived his life, and I really believe this. It comes from an old Broadway play in the 1940s, the idea. But here's the point. In the time of your life, live. So in that wondrous time, you shall not add to the misery and sorrow of the world, but shall smile to the infinite variety and to the mystery of it. And that was Chuck. He loved to travel worldwide. He loved to do everything. Everything was just, hey, that's life. He lived life, and that's big time.
Well said, my friend.
That was beautiful. What do you both think would be Chuck's best advice to the new journalists coming up the ranks here, not just at BNS, but other news stations around the world, given the state of affairs that we're in now? I mean, if we could all channel Chuck White, what do you think he would say to people in our industry so that his legacy of how he lived continues?
I would say that he would remind us that it's not about our opinion. It's not about being on one side or another side. It's about telling a story and being a great storyteller with facts and figures, and remembering who you're speaking to, because the community that you've been given this great opportunity to come into people's homes every night, the community is really who you are serving, whether you're sitting behind the desk or whether you're out in the community, to never forget that if those people aren't there and don't care about you and don't tune in, then nothing else matters. There's no career for you. So really remembering that it's all about the heart and soul of the people that you speak with, and be honest.
So true. Dave, what about you?
Well, I think he would be saying, particularly after what's going on right now in the local news business nationwide, I think he would probably say, you always need a good storyteller. You always need content. You always have to make it special for the people who are viewing. And it's going to be harder because you're not going to know who's viewing, like we did when we were in what we call the throes of local TV. And we were lucky. We were lucky when we were working in the time that we were working in.
But he would still always offer those words of hope that around the corner, right? We can get through this together, and we will. And I think that was what was so beautiful about Chuck White. What a great public servant, and the chance to talk to the both of you who also served as great public servants in our community. Thank you guys so much for sharing your insights about Chuck. Love you guys. Miss you.
Thank you.
Miss you. Miss you.
Be well.
Are you talking about legends getting together?
Just like old times.
Oh, it's so fun. See, I mean, because we've all worked with them together.
Absolutely.
It's so great to see those two again. Thank you for that visit. If we go back even further, news anchor Dana Tyler spent nearly a decade at WBNS in the 80s before moving on to New York City.
But she and Chuck worked together on so many specials here, including Heart of Ohio. And Dana recently stopped by Columbus, and she sat down with 10 TV's Dom Tiberi as the two reflected on what made Chuck White one of a kind.
Well, first of all, it feels like it's been 5 minutes ago. Where has the time gone by? And I remember we were two young kids here, and I met Chuck White, and he was my hero because I loved Mr. Tree. I loved Lucy's Toy Shop, and just to hear that voice, I remember the first time I heard it, I go, that's Mr. Tree, it's Chuck White. It was so cool.
See, I didn't know that at first when I came here. Let's give some time references. Early 80s we were here.
1981.
Yes, and both of us, 1981. And what a thrill to be working at this fantastic station that had all the great news coverage, but also community. And Chuck was such a part of that. And so after he never left after Lucy's Toy Shop, right?
No, stayed,
yes.
Became community affairs.
Yes, which just seems so right with the kind of person he was. But when I realized it was him, and it was somewhere between falling over and hugging him, hugging the tree. He just, that sturdy, secure, inspiring man to many people on all different levels.
I will never forget, I met him And I was like in awe. I just went, this is Chuck White, this is Mr. Tree. And I remember telling him, I said, you know, and he would tell the story because I told him he was like a mentor to me. And he was. And he was that kind of guy that, you know, he did it right. He always did it right. And, you know, dealing with him after, you know, when I got involved with the community affairs stuff and just some of the charity stuff, we ran the Family Fun golf tournament and Chuck was the head of it. And just seeing the passion he put into that and just the way he cared about the community. And, you know, there was not a more loving guy. And the thing I'll remember about him more than anything, I remember the great Christmas parties that we had out at the Wigwam. And I can't dance. You know I can't dance.
Crazy.
And my wife loved to dance, and Chuck and my wife would dance like crazy because Bernice was not much of a dancer either, his wife. And my wife and Chuck would, boy, they would dance like, it was amazing.
And that's part of who he was, a musician as well, of all these different skills and just this hunger and love of life and love of culture. And I saw something recently where he talked about that public service is what you do. And he embodied that. They had, I remember back at the heliport, when we collected food, and then people got tickets to some Ohio State preseason game.
Right.
And just something like, he was always so proud, didn't you think?
Yeah, the food parade, that was great.
Yes.
The food parade. And you know, if we did it and Chuck was involved, we were going to do it right or we weren't going to do it.
Right.
I mean, that was Chuck's mission. We're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And he cared so much about this community, and he cared so much about all of us. I mean, he was, and I meant it, he was a mentor to me.
And he had these ideas and the support of Jean D'Angelo and the Wolf family. And I just think it's so important how it just kept evolving. Children's Miracle Network Telethon, which I did with Janet. And you probably did it at one point.
I was there, I was on that.
Yes.
And
and at the very beginning, we went to Disneyland because the Osmonds, Marie Osmond was really involved, and I have this picture of Chuck and Janet and me, and we're like this with, I think it's Goofy, but even just the commitment to say, we're gonna do this, right? This is a class operation because Channel 10 is class, and the hospital and the leaps and bounds that place has grown is unbelievable. But I remember, you know, telethon, and it was my first time asking for money, and we had to be creative, which I bet you were good at.
Yeah, well, you have to be creative. and the thing is, you had to be on your toes if you were working with Chuck. Chuck brought the best out of us, let's face it. And, you know, even as, you know, when he retired, he still stayed active in the community. And he would come to different events, and I just loved hearing him speak. And he just had this zest about it. You could not meet Chuck White and not like him.
True.
You couldn't meet him and not like him. And I remember just going to different events. He loved, and this will date us back to when they used to have media night at Scioto Downs.
I
remember those?
Yes.
And I'll tell you what, Chuck loved that.
You love
night.
the ponies?
Oh, well, he just liked that, and he liked the endless shrimp, and it was a prime rib dinner, and it was like
he enjoyed life.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
He enjoyed life.
He definitely enjoyed life.
And I think that on the other side of that, the people, especially with the things that were community and fundraising, he loved the rewarding feeling that knowing what we were doing, if it was raising money for the hospital or food for the hungry, that he knew real people. He would speak to, you know, and not in a bragging way, but just in such a, I don't know, such a human decency. It was so authentic, you know, and just, he knew he did good, and he always wanted to do more. And I remember also, I want to go back, if you don't mind, to Lucy's Toy Shop. But more so, I grew up in Worthington, and so did Chuck and Bernice and their boys. I was speaking with my mother about, you know, how Chuck would always say when I was here at Channel 2, how's your mom, how's your dad, da, 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 da. And so they both lived in the same area of Worthington, and I think one of Chuck's sons, my mom says, cut cut our grass. So I said to Mom last night, and so how old were we watching Lucy's Toy Shop? 5, 6?
I was a baby, kid,
right?
5, 6, 7 years old.
Right, and so you're nailed in front of the TV. And I said to my mother yesterday, and I don't know why yesterday, she's 91. I said, Mom, did you know always that was your friend Chuck White who was Mr. Tree? And she goes, of course! But she didn't tell us, just the beautiful mystery of it and how he and Lucy this inspired, and they taught us. They taught us, we learned.
We learned a lot, and you're right. I just remember every day being glued to that TV, never missed it, and I was so excited. I know you were on it, and I got on the show, and I remember coming down here, and they had not added on like they have now, and I just remember coming into that big studio
right.
and seeing it, and they had this area where you sat with all the kids, and they had this trolley that went around, and if the trolley made a noise, you got a puppet. And I just remember I never got my puppet, and I wanted that puppet so bad. But I remember you could go to Old Lazarus downtown, remember? And they had Mr. Tree down there, and they sold the puppets and all that. It was I wish kids today could experience what we did, what we had.
And it was simple. I mean, there's all this extra production, that's wonderful, but this was simple. A few chyrons, remember they made the cake, the chyron, and but it was words and gestures and about being kind, and we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance with Walrus, right?
Right.
And Stanley and
Stanley Mouse.
I love Stanley, and so I never realized when Stanley Mouse was on that Lucy could not be there in person. I would totally, right?
Hey, look who's coming here. I've got to hide. You know Lucy's coming. If Lucy sees me here, she's going to have 10 fish.
Shh. Here comes one of the royalty.
Oops.
Here comes the other guard.
Lucy? Where?
Can't talk to you now.
Okay.
Out.
Later. Yeah, okay. Shh. Oh, where are we? This must be Buckingham Palace. And there's the guard. I beg your pardon. Are you a guard? Doesn't say a word, does he?
Pierre the dog, he was Pierre, and he was Dragon, and of course, iconic Mr. Tree.
Mr. Tree.
And you remember the song, right?
Yes, I do. Shall we?
Do you remember it?
Yes.
Well,
do you think I don't?
Let's see. We'll test ourselves. You ready?
Yes. Okay.
Hi there, Mr. Tree. We're very glad to see you. Wake up, Mr. Tree. It's daytime, can't you see?
And he would go, oh! His eyes would go open, and the branches and Lucy, we'd all talk, and he'd say hello to the children. But there was one key thing we were not supposed to say. Sleep.
Right, because he'd go back to sleep.
He would go back to sleep. He would go back to sleep. And Chuck, let's not forget, he's a journalist here, reporter, first in black in the state, I believe. And so I think that's another thing I really respect and look back on is his multi-talents, the integrity that he brought to everything that he did seemed endless. It seemed endless.
I miss him. I
miss him too. And when I came back here, it's only been a couple of times, it was like yesterday, yesterday I worked here, and that was 1990, so I was here 81 to 90. But still it was like, hey Dana, how's your family? Da, 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 da. He was great, we were lucky.
We were real lucky. And when we got done singing that song, I wanted to hear him.
Yeah.
I miss you, Chuck.
Chuck.
Chuck was always singing. It was just such a beautiful thing. So many people remember Mr. Tree. We just missed that era here. It would have been nice to get in on some of that. But we're talking generations of families who have fond memories out there that we hear, just like Dom's there, and we hear from people all around the community.
And I remember, Jeff, back in January, I think it was 2025, when we told Chuck that there was a replica of Mr. Tree at one of the Columbus Metropolitan Library branches. So he decided to pay it a little visit.
Yeah, let's just say it was very clear that Chuck still had that magic touch to connect with children.
Hi there, Mr. Tree. We're very glad to see you.
I grew up watching Lucy's Toy Shop, so I sang the Wake Up Mr. Tree song to my kids, and now I sing it to my grandkids.
When I saw that the library was going to have Mr. Tree, I wanted to be sure to bring my granddaughters because I remember my husband talking about how much fun it was.
I love it.
I walked right up and said, well, let's talk. But I didn't realize that we needed a special person to be here to actually talk.
Well, how are you? Tell me, what do you like to do?
I thought it was a great replica of the tree and of Mr. Tree. It was fun to see that replica duplicating what was going on some 40, 50 years ago. This was the original Mr. Tree. The Lazarus tree was a replica of the Mr. Tree that we had on Channel 10.
Tell me, what did you get for Christmas?
He would give the date and the time and the weather. Hello, Lucy. And then he would be the voice of wisdom.
My favorite color is blue.
I remember a conversation I had with Dom Tiberi, and someone had asked him, who was your mentor in your life? They expected him to say some famous movie star. He says, oh, my mentor was Mr. Tree. So Mr. Tree carried a great deal of weight back then.
Oh, I love you too.
My goodness, Chuck really brought to life a cast of unforgettable characters on Lucy's Toy Shop. These are those original puppets, along with Mr. Tree. There are so many lessons that Chuck taught through kindness and curiosity because of that show. They were truly an extension of Chuck White's personality that resonated with kids and parents alike back in the 60s and 70s. Those are timeless treasures right there.
They certainly are, and they bring back such memories for so many people, and you can hear the voices with them as it goes.
Don't you wish we kind of grew up with Lucy's Toy Shop here?
Yes, we missed out that generation.
Darn it.
And you know, Aunt Chuck always talked about how he first got into the television business. It was almost fate. His roommate worked at WBNS. Chuck was a journalism minor at Ohio State, so he applied for a copywriter position, and of course, he got it. That job landed in 1957. And what some people may not know is that the roommate we're talking about here was none other than Frederick Peerenboom, better known to many longtime viewers as Fritz the Night Owl.
And Jeff, Fritz hosted his own show right here on 10 TV from 1974 to 1991. He really became a bit of a cult figure himself for his late night movie commentary and those signature oversized glasses. He sat down with legendary 10 TV anchor Jerry Revish as the two remembered their friendship with Chuck.
Fritz Peerenboom, I cannot believe I'm sitting here with you. It's been so long.
As Terry Garr said in Young Frankenstein, the feeling is mutual.
You know, when I first got here to Columbus back in '74 and watched Channel 10, after the news, Night Owl Theater, I always loved seeing you there.
Well, actually, you and I worked together for a couple of years at radio.
That's right.
And I think you went, what year did you go to TV?
1980.
Okay, so what happened was after I got out of the Army in '59, you left. I went to an ad agency and did part-time work at Channel 10.
Mm-hmm.
But I never worked with you at radio in that period.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember you there with Dick Ziffin and you know, all those guys.
Actually, you know, it's a thing that Chuck and I never worked together on radio or TV,
Mm-hmm.
but I worked with Chuck as a musician. As you know, he was a terrific guitar player, and in the folk music explosion, he did part-time shows at all of the clubs and so forth.
I remember meeting Chuck when I first came to Channel 10, and the man was he had such a presence about him.
Yeah.
He was such a gentleman and a gentle man. And I just remember him telling me, you know, you're working for a great company here. The
Mm-hmm.
Wolf family are great people, and you're going to enjoy yourself. do your best, and you'll always have a job.
Now, was he doing Lucy then, or was he public service?
The Lucy days were behind him when I met him, and he was working, you know, doing the community affairs stuff and all of that.
He was public service director.
Yeah, right.
He worked with all of the charities and churches and civil groups.
Right.
Had to do a lot of traveling around town, but everybody knew him from those interviews he did and live in-person things where he would get Channel 10 to do something for cancer or heart or what have you.
And I remember getting involved with the telethon, and he was like the man behind the screen pulling the strings for all of that. He did all that work, and I remember that telethon used to go for like 24 straight hours, I believe. You know, no breaks in it, and he was helping keep all of that moving
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, I was working outside with the people handing out the food and autographs, and I think Joe Holbrook was there, and there were about 4 or 5 of us air people. Dave Kaylor was out there, and we were handing out the boxes of food to the people that drove through.
Yeah.
But Chuck put it all together.
He did, and you wouldn't have, and he was such a unassuming fellow. I mean, he wasn't a shrinking violet by any measure, but he was just, he loved producing those things. He liked being a part of it from the backside of it, if I can say that.
And it was a thing that, well, actually, he had a weekly show on Channel 10 at nights where he and his trio would do folk music. And I think that lasted for a year, and I believe it was on one night a week from 7:30 till, it was after the local news ended, and then he would go from, I think, 7:30 to 8 before network.
And he was probably the first black man on television in Ohio. I really loved talking with him about everything, because he was a man of all seasons. He very well read, and he liked to travel a lot, and that was something I want to do more of in my retiring years. But he just would regale me with all these stories about different places he'd gone to and different experiences he had. Talk to me about how he was in a pub one night in some city in Ireland, and they just started singing Danny Boy, and he kind of took over the song.
Oh yeah.
And he said he turned around and people were crying.
That
was so beautiful.
That was not an unusual experience from the way he sang.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of those folk songs in those days did bring a tear to the eye, because at that time, when I was just on radio full time, folk music was actually equaling rock and roll.
Right. He was Mr. Tree, and I remember going to different locations, and people, the older ones, would remember him as Mr. Tree.
Right.
He would just bring that phrase out, and it would just bring smiles across a lot of people's faces, because they remembered him in that way. I also thought he was sort of a Harry Belafonte kind of guy when it came to his
Well, I think
music.
Harry was one of the first people to do folk songs on radio, on a thing, and I do think he was a very big influence on Chuck, both as an actor and a musician. And Chuck also did the Pierre puppet on Lucy's Toy Shop, and the thing was, he used a different voice as Mr. Tree from his regular voice, and a different voice for the, he spoke with a French accent for the hand puppet that Lucy created. I think his name, Angela told me his name was Pierre. I had forgotten that. But he did a couple of puppet characters, but Mr. Tree was his biggie.
Yeah. It was like a mutual admiration society between he and I, because I think he looked upon me as a son, and I looked upon him as a father figure in many ways. You know, when I lost my father, I needed that dimension in my life, and Chuck was that person. And then when he passed, I just felt like I really lost a really good friend, a mentor, somebody that helped me learn the ropes of things, because when I first started into television, I was really pretty rough around the edges, very green. But Chuck was there as just a guide, just a gentle guide about it all, helping me just navigate the whole thing about TV and celebrity and all that stuff. You know, we could stay on Chuck White for a couple weeks talking about all of the things that he did.
And they were varied and interesting.
Varied and interesting as he was. A one-of-a-kind guy, one of a kind. There'll never be another Chuck White, as there'll never be another Fritz Peerenboom.
So clear, we got a couple of legends right there. And Chuck left such an unforgettable mark on everyone that he came across. He was quiet, a force, though, behind so many causes and missions benefiting Central Ohio organizations and beyond.
And you know, we both know this. Awards were never his thing, never his mission, but Chuck won 3 Emmy Awards along the way, earning respect across the television industry and really throughout the community. Back in 2014, he was inducted into the Ohio Senior Citizens Hall of Fame.
The Wolf family fondly remembered Chuck when he passed away last October, saying Chuck represented the company and our family in the community so well. They went on to say the Wolf family is so appreciative of his many years of service, not only to the company, but also to the community at large. Chuck will be missed. We echo those words.
We do. Really, what a legend. Chuck White in front of the camera, a presence that made you stop and watch. Behind the scenes, though, co-producing, writing, puppeteering, just so much talent.
So many things he did. He lived his 90 years of life to the fullest, no question about that, and always with that smile that made you feel like you were his best friend. To know him was to know a friend, certainly, and to know somebody who was on a lifelong adventure. I would always ask him, where'd you just go, Chuck, or where are you going next? And there was always a great answer for it.
Absolutely.
We leave you now with one final recap of Chuck White's 5 decades at WBNS.
Father, what is the origin of the Greek Orthodox Church?
Chuck White spent more than 5 decades at WBNS. He wore many hats: anchor, producer, puppeteer, and mentor.
It's a great honor to have been a part of the history, not only of WBNS TV, but of the history of this community.
Oh, I love it. It's great. It's great.
In the 1960s, Chuck brought joy to living rooms across Central Ohio as part of Lucy's Toy Shop, the longest-running children's show.
Oh, there, Mr. Tree, we're very glad to see you.
He was the voice of Mr. Tree, that sleepy 7-foot puppet who could only be awakened by song, a moment thousands of children waited for each morning.
I walked right up and said, well, let's talk. But I didn't realize that we needed a special person to be here to actually talk.
Well, how are you? Tell me, what do you like to do?
I thought it was a great replica of the tree and of Mr. Tree. It was fun to see that replica duplicating what was going on some 40, 50 years ago.
Chuck was the first African-American broadcaster in Ohio television.
At the head of the Greek Orthodox Church is Father Anthony Saris.
A true pioneer, breaking barriers while lifting others along the way.
I really didn't have any idea that I was going to wind up on the air, although I thought, you know, if I did that, I could do it. I could do it and do it well.
Over the years, he became more than just a familiar face.
Thank you, Central Ohio.
Beyond the studio, Chuck helped launch the Children's Miracle Network Telethon in 1985, raising millions for local hospitals. And even after retiring, Chuck remained a key fabric of this community, working with groups such as the American Cancer Society, the Urban League, and the Alzheimer's Association.
Last year at the food parade, we raised over 62,000 items of food. We just want to hit 62,000 items or more this year to date.
Chuck White may be gone, but his spirit and his stories will live on. His contagious laugh and a deep love for Central Ohio, inspiring generations along the way.
Community service is the rent that we pay for occupying space on this planet. And that to me just about says it all. We all need to be our brother and sister's keeper.